Hello and welcome to Console Shock Retro and Modern Gaming Chat with me, Trev, and as always, Stu. How's it going, Stu? I hope you're absolutely spot on.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, good.
I mean, it's pretty hot at the moment. Are you getting hot? You went on holiday recently. Did you keep cool, or was it as bad there as it was here?
No, I was on the luxurious coast of Belgium, and there was a lovely breeze coming in off the North Sea. So it was warm, but no, it was perfectly bearable, and I certainly recommend going to Belgium. We visited Bruges. Yeah, had a good time.
Yeah,
I took my Steam Deck with me.
Oh yeah. Oh,
yeah.
Wow. Did you manage to complete anything, or just?
I didn't complete anything. I just clicked on a couple of times and sort of played Mega Bonk, which is a great game.
That's a perfect game for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was very hot in London. I'm right next to the Thames where I live, but there's no breeze or anything coming off it in the summer. If anything, really hot temperatures make it smell of a toilet. So that isn't always pleasant. But I mean, we're talking about getting hot and in this hot weather, and nearly getting cooked from the hot weather. I mean, one thing we're absolutely getting cooked on is price rises, and we had a very big price rise that we got hit with yesterday on a particular device that we're going to get into right now. The Steam Deck has been hit with the RAM-pocalypse price increase, and we thought, there was never really any indication that they were going to raise the price of the Steam Deck. It seemed to be happily doing its own thing. It was in a pretty good price position where it used to be. But yeah, it's been out of stock for a while. Obviously, I got mine a long time ago, and you've had one for a long time, so we've never really had to think about buying one in recent, times. But it's been out of stock for a while, and all of a sudden it popped back up again yesterday, but with absolutely insane price increases, which kind of came out of the blue, really. I mean, I think it was like late at night, our time. So yeah, what were your initial sort of thoughts? Well, before we do that, we'll go through exactly what the prices are now. So the 500, there's only two models now. They don't have any LCD Steam Decks. It's just the OLED, which in itself is kind of annoying because the LCDs sort of fell into a cheaper pricing sort of bracket. If you weren't bothered about it being an OLED, you could save some money. They're gone now. But the 512 gig is $649, and the 1 terabyte is $779. And
that's
both
pounds.
Of those.
That's pounds.
That's pounds. That's the UK prices, yeah. Because we didn't. I don't think. I'm not sure if that was at the same point in time as the American prices that kind of seemed to go up before everybody else. But the 512 gig was $479, and gone up to $649, as you just said. The 1 terabyte was $569, which is what I paid, 2023 when that came out. And it's now $779. So you're looking at, a couple of £100. You're paying now for that top tier model. So what do you think about that, Stu? Was that a surprise for you?
I think it was a little bit. I
kind of wasn't it almost?
Yeah, because I wasn't sort of tracking the pricing. I've got one. I'm really happy with it. I think it's a great piece of kit. And so when I thought potentially, there might be a Steam Deck 2. There might be, maybe a different model. Maybe it's it's just there. I don't know. They just sold lots of them, and they were just out of stock. And to be honest, I didn't give it an amazing amount of thought. But then hearing, nearly almost £200 and £200 price increase, that to me is huge. It's that's a lot of money. That's huge. That's a lot of money, and and I think we talked about it on here before. Is we talked about when the Steam Deck came out, it was I mean, I think I originally bought the 256 gig one, and then I bought your old one off you. But the 256 gig one was maybe £400, 350, I think it was.
Yeah,
And it was
it was very good price.
It was described as oh, this is the biggest deal in gaming, and the fact that you've had it for so long, and
Well, I think it was only about, I mean, a Nintendo Switch was, I think the Switch OLED is about 250-ish quid, I think, or something. I'll be a little bit more than that.
279, I think it was. Yeah.
279. Yeah, that's it. So when you're looking at that 2021 period when the Steam Deck became available for sale, I think people didn't really get their hands on them until 2022. I don't think I did until then when my pre-order came through. It was, and there wasn't a Switch 2 at that point. So that was quite an obvious comparison. There wasn't other PC handhelds really initially until the Rogali came out the year later. But yeah, you said it was really the OLED Switch versus the Steam Deck kind of at that point. And the OLED Switch was 279, as you say. The Steam Deck was 350. Yeah, it wasn't OLED, but for the amount of power jump you got, which was pretty big, to the Steam Deck, which had a much bigger library of games, obviously off the bat, because it's a PC. I think that was really great value for money, wasn't it, at that initial launch?
Yeah, exactly. It was huge, value for money, and I actually think, what are you doing comparing it to the Switch? Even the normal Switch to Switch OLED, that's a console. That's in a fixed environment. This is, a Steam Deck, which is ultimately a portable PC. And
it's in a much different environment now.
The price
is much harder to justify now.
Yeah, and if they were still selling them for £350 or pounds, and I'd be like, oh my god, this is, what are they? Are they crazy? They're just giving these things away, and it's almost sort of, you've had the Xbox, a ROG Ally Xbox, whatever. That's come out. That's been, I don't know, £800-900. Then you've had other machines that have come out with bigger screens, and they've been, I think some of them are up to sort of £2,000 to £3,000. These portable, sort of consoles, sort of I don't know what the term is for them, handheld PCs.
Handheld gaming PC, yeah.
They've been huge prices, and then the Steam Deck has always felt like, okay, this has been subsidized because if they go on there and then everyone will buy £200-300 of games a year, and then there'll be lifelong subscribers on Steam. They'll purchase games on there for the next 10 years, and so on. So I think I understand, the price, and you've got to look at it from the other way. That I think with Valve, they're not there to subsidize people's gaming. And that's a little bit of a controversial thing. Is it's my God-given right that systems should go down in price, and then. Well, then they would argue, well, if it's our God-given right not to sell something for a loss, and what would be the point in doing that? If you do that long enough, people lose their jobs and so on, and we won't want to see that. So I'm sort of thinking that it's I would like to have seen them, maybe sort of come out with a sort of switch to a Steam Deck 2, or maybe a bit more storage in it, or maybe sort of different colors, or maybe, this one's got a better battery, or this one's got better joysticks. We've done the Steam Deck, and that's got the Steam controller, that's got better controllers, maybe a little bit of a redesign, a bit more. So you go, oh yeah, actually, I understand why I'm paying a bit more now. But I feel like they've gone, right, okay, let's just bring out the old horse again, and stick a little bit more memory in there, and we'll just flog it for £200 more, and I think they should have done a little bit more with it, or
Yeah, I
maybe
mean,
even offered a, everyone that buys it, we're really sorry about, the price uplift. Everyone that buys it gets a £50 Steam voucher,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so on, or something like that to sweeten the deal.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not a great deal now. I mean, when we look at that very
Mm,
first Steam Deck 349, its only real competition at that point was, well, there were some PC gaming handhelds, the very early sort of generation of those,
mm,
like the GPD Win. That was pretty, but they were hitting thousands of pounds. But it was really sort of like the Switch that was kind of in its ballpark, and it was a good deal.
mm,
Especially as a gaming, a half decent gaming PC. It was underpowered then, and it's even more underpowered now. But it was still a good deal. But I think now that you can't justify buying a Steam Deck 2021 tech that was already struggling to sort of keep up with AAA games in 2021, and even more so
mm,
now. It's not worth. I'd certainly not the 1 terabyte model at that price. 779 versus an Asus Xbox ROG Ally X, the top
mm,
level of that. Xbox Ally. Family of handhelds. There's two of them really. I mean, you can get those there. They start around 799, and that isn't a
mm,
great price either. But if you've got money burning a hole in your pocket, 800 or quid, and you're thinking, I want to get a PC gaming handheld, it'd be hard to recommend the Steam Deck 1 terabyte OLED at that price versus a ROG Ally X, which is going to be more powerful. It's not an
yeah.
insanely giant leap in power, but it'll just it's enough of a jump in power that some of those, I always go back and mention Space Marine 2, which is a very heavy game, and it doesn't run well at all on the Steam Deck. You're looking at, frame rates often in the teens and staying there. Whereas, I've got a ROG Ally X, which is the sort of generation of ROG Ally just before the Xbox Ally X,
Mm,
and it runs fine on that. You can hit sort of 30, 40 frames a second
mm,
throughout the entire. It's not amazing, but playable. The game is more than playable at that. So yeah, when you compare those two price points, the Steam Deck doesn't really come out, and you can obviously, if you get it and you don't like Windows, you can just stick Steam OS on it now and make it
mm,
effectively a Steam Deck. Okay, you don't have the
yeah.
trackpad, so you're going to miss out on that, but yeah, it's just value for money wise. That's completely gone out the window now. And yeah, it was sold out for a while, like you were saying, and we were like, okay, does that mean there's maybe a new one coming out? I mean, I don't think there was ever really any. I didn't think that a new Steam Deck is coming out for a few years yet. Now I'm worried about how much it would cost. But
Mm,
the only sort of Steam hardware I think that's going to be coming out is that Steam machine. But with a 1 terabyte Steam Deck pushing 800 quid, I mean, what does that mean for the Steam machine? We've all been worried about how much it's going to cost, but now I'm
mm,
thinking that's going to hit. That's probably going to hit about. It will be at least what the 1 terabyte OLED Steam Deck costs, at least,
mm.
and that's pushing £800, as much as a PS5 Pro.
Well,
And it might probably going to be more than that in reality. It's going to be more like
well,
900, 1,000. I think it's dead in the water if that's what it
uh,
is.
yeah, because I think it's shown sort of Valve's attitude to, okay, well, we're going to release hardware, and we want to make a little profit on them, and
Yeah.
and we're not fussed about sort of bad press for releasing something, because we're going to release it, and that's going to, I don't know. That's going to be the way it is. And if anything, their press release when it came out is like, oh, okay, the Steam Deck OLED is now back in stock due to imports and tariffs and RAM prices and commodity prices. These are the new prices. There's no ambiguity there. They're saying exactly the reason that they put the price up. So the Steam machine would be exactly in a very similar situation when that comes out. It is going to be yeah, this is the price, because unfortunately we we want to sort of make money on it, and it has to be something that sort of pays for itself. And they're not going down the route of, because I mean, I always thought that the original Steam machine was Steam Deck was subsidized. It must have been, because it was such a good price. And now this one sort of is now showing actually how much it sort of really costs to build. And
I think it was subsidized. I think
Mm,
they obviously got AMD to design a custom APU that isn't like an off the shelf thing like the other PC handhelds that use the Z2 Extreme and the Z1 Extreme. That's kind of just a part you can buy, and
mm,
then you build your handheld around it. Whereas the one in the Steam Deck is a custom bit of silicon, like games consoles are, and they got
mm,
AMD to make it for them. And I guess they got a bulk order, and they were able to get a discount, and they probably ate some of the cost as well on top of that.
mm.
They might still be eating some of the cost even now. We don't really know, do we? Because things are just cost more now when it's got RAM in
Yeah.
there.
Well, that's it.
Um,
Trevor, that's a good point. They could still be making a loss on that, or
yeah,
on,
yeah,
on
yeah,
that machine, but they've gone,
yeah.
okay, right, we can't lose £200 on each machine. We can only afford to lose £50, or they could be making £300 per unit, and they could be completely sort of fleecing us. But there's been
Well, I
lots
think
of.
they are capable of eating a loss because they know people are going to buy games off Steam. That's not
Mm,
something that like Lenovo can do, is it? Or MSI or any of the other people that make handhelds.
mm,
Asus, obviously, they have to basically make their money off the handheld, and that's kind of it. Apart from I don't know,
mm,
warranties or something and accessories that they might make for it. Steam at least know they're probably, and obviously someone could just put Windows on it and never go on the Steam store.
mm,
Even with just Steam OS, they might just put their Epic games on there, and because you can do that. But yeah, they're probably going to be. Most people are going to be just buying games off Steam, so they can eat sort of a bit of a loss on it, knowing they're going to make some of that up. The other guys obviously don't have that, so I would
mm.
think that I would think they are taking a loss, and I think they probably still are, and things are just more expensive, and they've had to bump their price up significantly because of that. I think that's
Mm.
what's happening there, Stu. Yeah,
Yeah, so I mean, I think you really just said it, but you obviously wouldn't recommend. So if someone said came on here, let's say we had a guest, and they said,
yeah.
right, well, I've got a pocket full of money. I want to get a handheld PC. What would you advise them to do to get a Steam machine,
Right
get
now,
the Legion Go, the I don't know
I
which
think
one
it's quite
would you?
easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fairly easy. I mean, outside of going into the second-hand market, I mean, I was able to get a ROG Ally X for 500 quid, which is a
Mm,
pretty decent handheld and is more powerful than the Steam Deck. But if you wanted something brand new, I mean, I'm looking right now. There's the Lenovo Legion Go S,
mm,
which actually it comes with Steam OS. There's a Windows version and a Steam OS version. It was the first
mm,
handout outside of the Steam Deck that you could buy with Steam OS on it without you having to go and install it on.
mm,
And it's got a Ryzen Z2 Go, which is basically nearly identical as the APU in the Steam Deck. So performance-wise, you might think, okay, they're probably going to be about the same, but you can do higher TDPs on the Legion Go S with that Z2 Go. So you can
mm,
still push past the performance of a Steam Deck. Not massively, but you can. So it performs a bit better. And it's got a 1 terabyte SSD, and it's got an 8-inch full HD touchscreen, so a higher resolution screen. That's also 120 hertz. It's not OLED, but it is bigger and it's 120 hertz. Non-OLED
mm,
screens could still be very good. Don't tell John Linneman that, but they can be. And that
mm,
costs just from Curry's. That's 549 quid. That's a much better deal in my eyes than the Steam Deck, and you're still getting Steam OS. It's
mm,
got a trackpad on it, so it's not as good as the Steam Deck ones, but it's on there. Um, I think that's a much better deal. 549 quid for the Legion Go S than a 1 terabyte. It's cheaper than the 512 gig. So you're getting double the storage, 649 Steam Deck versus a 549 Legion Go that has double the storage, bigger screen, 120 hertz screen, slightly better performance. I think I'd probably point someone towards that. I think that's a really good deal.
No, I think
what do you think about
really,
that?
well, I think that's actually sort of really good advice, and I'm not sitting here sort of tracking the prices of them, and I've got a little bit confused with this. There always seems to be new ones coming out with, new generations of processors that have got the word extreme at the end, and you do get a little bit, fatigue from all the different machines. But I think you've explained it really well there, that you can actually go out and get a machine with actually better specs. It's got more storage than the 512 model, and it's
100 quid cheaper,
and it's 100 quid cheaper. So I'm like, well, ooh.
And the Legion Go S, that kind of came out bang in the middle of this RAM-apocalypse. So I don't think they're going to raise the price again. That's probably already more expensive than it would have been, before any of this happened. So that's probably going to stay at that price. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's the Switch too, but if you're just getting the price that's going up, of course, soon. But if you're just getting you just want a PC handheld, I mean, that might be the one to go for now.
I think we've got to give a little bit of credit to Nintendo and PlayStation, because they've come out and there's no credit for putting the pricing up, and that's not a good thing. But they've come out and said, okay, right, in September or in June or in July, the prices of our machines are going to go up $50, £100, $75, whatever they're going up by. At that point, until then, they're still this price, but at that point, they're going up. So people have got the opportunity to go out there and go, well, actually, God, it does, if I should buy it now because it's going to go up then, and that's a really good thing. Where actually the Steam machines, they almost sort of said, okay, right, let's create some demand for it. Let's completely sell out, and we're still going to carry on making them in the background, and we'll absolutely sort of flood the market with them, but not until the end of May. So we'll have, because they've been out of stock for 2 to 3 months. Yeah. So that's probably people are like, oh no, I really want a Steam Deck. Oh, it's brilliant. I can use it on the train. All my games are on Steam. I want a Steam Deck, and so then there's this. Oh, they're now available, right? Oh God, they've gone up. But I really want one, and they're not going to sort of do the research about other units and other cheaper ways to get it. They're probably just going to buy it. So I think there's, I would have liked them to keep it in stock and given people warning like other manufacturers have done.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with the Switch. We've obviously got a few months ahead of time before that goes up to, I don't think they've announced a UK price at this point. So we don't actually know what that's going up by. And we can actually look at the price of when, obviously the big uproar originally was when the PS5 went up. That was kind of the first one that went up in price, wasn't it? The Xbox followed suit shortly after that. But that's gone up. It launched in 2020 at 449. It's now 569. But that's the disc edition, and that's gone up by 120 quid. So that's nowhere near what the 200 nearly that we've seen with the Steam Deck. It's still not great. Ideally, they shouldn't have gone up at all. But yeah, it's still not great. But the PS5, if you, like you said, recommend a handheld, I'd say the Legion Go S is probably a better deal now. But probably, if you're not caring about it being a handheld device, a PS5 is a better deal than a Steam Deck. If you're not bothered about taking it around with you. And then, I mean, at the moment, the Switch is £396. And I think with the Mario Kart World Bond, I think it's 430. I think it'll probably go up to that Mario Kart World price without the Mario Kart World. It'll be like
I
430 quid. Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what they're going to kind of do. And I mean, it's I mean, I was sort of thinking about this on the way home, and you know, come up with some contrarian arguments. And I'm going to say, I think, Trev, gaming's cheaper now. There you go. I've said it. And,
Yeah, I
and
do see that argument with like, oh, Street Fighter 2 was 70 quid, you know, in 1992.
no,
And now it's,
I would
yeah,
say I've got it here. A history of video game consoles, and people, it like these things like the Nintendo to the Super Nintendo. That was like 5 to 6 years between
yeah,
machines, and then it's gone out further. Where the 360 was, you know, it's almost like 7 or 8 years,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and then the Xbox One and well, certainly the PS4, they've only really just stopped bringing out games for the PS4. There are probably still a few due to come out, but then the PS4 that probably came out over 10 years ago. I think probably you'll probably
yeah,
go, it's longer than that, Stuart. But yeah, so
2013.
like 2013, so 13 years ago, and they've just
Yeah,
stopped releasing games. So actually, if you think about that, the fact that if you're buying a games console on day one, now I bought the Switch 2 on day one. I tried to get the Xbox Series X, and they both cost less than what they are now. And if you go, well, actually, I had this machine, and then it's going to have a lifespan of 8, 9, maybe 10 years
yeah,
as a competent gaming system which gets updates and new games come out for, and then actually divide that by how many years. You're going, oh, I've got the latest, oh, I've got a really good console, I've got a PS5, I've got whatever, and then that's going to be like, oh yeah, it's 35 quid a year, which is going to be 40 quid a year to have this machine. So, and comparing that to, oh, I've got the NES, and then it seemed, oh, now the Super Nintendo's coming out, or the PlayStation to PlayStation 2 was only like 5 years. So you're actually
yeah.
getting it's arguably cheaper because they
Cost
last
per
so much
year.
longer.
Yeah,
Cost per year, and you can say the same about now you buying the Steam machine for the Steam Deck for what was it, 500 or 450 or whatever it was, and then actually you're going, well, all the use I've got out of that, actually I got a really good deal. So it comes down to buying machines early and using them a lot, and actually you go, well, divide that by how many hours you're on there. Obviously, you take away the games, and I think, I don't want to say this, but I think top tier games are actually probably going up a little bit in price. And things like what's it came out this week was the new James Bond game. On Steam it's $59.99.
yeah.
Uncharted. James Bond Uncharted. Bond Hitman. And then so that's come out, and that seems to be like $59.99. But then other things there are a lot of good deals out there in sales, and you've got a lot more sort of flexibility to buy your game. So am I being crazy, or am I just what do you think?
It's a really good point. I mean, there's not really a one-to-one comparison. I mean, obviously you can compare consoles specifically now to consoles back in the day, and you can make the argument that it's cheaper now. Obviously, with inflation and everything, Street Fighter 2 is over £100, or like 160 or 70. I'm not, without putting it through a calculator, it'll be a lot. Absolutely more than a game you could buy now. If you're talking about just gaming generally, I mean, someone would argue, you see these arguments on Twitter about, I bought a Street Fighter for 60 quid back in 92, so you're being stupid if you're complaining now. But then someone would be like, well, I bought an Amiga then, so I paid my games for 20 quid. You know, when you were paying that much on your console, and then someone say, "Well, my ZX Spectrum, it was £1 for a game in
£3.99,
WH Smith or
£2.99.
Boots." Yeah. So and now, most of the time you tend to pay less if you're gaming on PC, like a game like Uncharted, the new James Bond game that just came out. That's like, I don't know, I think it's probably 70 quid on like consoles. But you can find a key, a key site I don't mean a dodgy key site, but ones where, excess keys are being sold to this place and they're then selling them on for a little bit less than what the retail price is. You can get that game for maybe 40 or 50 quid. So you can save money that way. I think there was a big leap when you got to, you had the cartridge. Well, back in the day, like when I was a kid and I first got into games, the 8-bit, I was in that sort of cross-gen of 8 and 16-bit, where, the Super Nintendo and the Mega Drive were fairly new by a year or a couple of years at most. The 8-bit systems were quite mature at that point, having been out for, the gens, as you say, were a lot shorter then. So this won't sound like a long time, but they were 3, 4, 5 years old. At most 5 years old. The NES, I think, 1985 in the US, although it would have been a couple of years after that where we're from. And they were quite mature. And I recall like a Sega always used to be a little bit cheaper.
Definitely. Yeah.
And I think Master System games, the 8-bit games were like, let's take like Sonic the Hedgehog 1. Like the Mega Drive version would be like $44.99. And like the Sega Master System version would be $29.99. And the Game Gear would normally be about $29.99 for every game. Maybe a Master System game would be another £5 if it was a big release on top of that, like 35. You could get brand new Master System games for 20 quid. And the Mega Drive, the games tend to top out at like $49.99, I think, really. The Super Nintendo was different and the NES was different. I feel like the NES... when they were both sort of together at the same point in time, the SNES and the NES together, the NES was obviously positioned. The 8-bit consoles were positioned as the budget entry level option, and the 16-bit was the level above that, kind of, I don't know, the pro quote unquote console. I feel like the NES games were about $44.99, and the Super Nintendo were kind of $59.99. And that was where the consoles are at, really. And then we got to the PS1 era, and all of a sudden, because the games were made on CDs, which are very cheap, and you weren't buying a box of chips and a motherboard, which is what you're doing when you bought a cartridge, the price dropped. It might have even been able to go lower, but basically you could get a brand new AAA PS1 game on day of release for $44.99, and later on, there'd be like the Platinum range of like games that had been out for a couple of years. They would re-release them, normally ruin the artwork by putting like a value version or like the silver. Actually, they weren't too bad with the PS1, but they just made the PlayStation logo silver. But that'd be 20 quid, brand new, and they were games that old. Games kind of aged faster then in a weird way, like Tekken 1. Came out in 95, and then by the time we got to 97, we're already at Tekken 3. And I think 98 is when we got the PS1 version. So Tekken 1 was like ancient by then. And that was already going for like 20 quid. So yeah, you could really buy a load of games for not a huge... I don't feel like they felt expensive then either. The 16-bit era did. That did feel like you'd get one game for your birthday and one for Christmas. But the PS1 era, it was like, you did feel that was a drop in price, didn't you? Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, 100%. And you could see that from how much cheaper the PlayStation games were to the N64 games. They were certainly cheaper. And it was, you see people with big piles of games, and you didn't have to think as much about buying them. And it was rather than a Christmas or a birthday thing, it was a bit more, if you'd done well at school or you saved up your pocket money for a few weeks, you might buy a second-hand game. It seemed like a lot easier to sort of pick up games, but you see people now, and I'm sort of sitting here, and it's I've talked about my gaming PC, and I'm still playing all the latest games. I'm playing, Forza Horizon, 6 at the moment. It's I've got it on high settings, not ultra, not mega, high settings, and I'm running it at 160 frames a second. You know, looks amazing. My computer's 3 years old. You know, let's say, will I be sitting here in 3 years' time going, oh yeah, it's still fine. I'm playing Horizon 7 at, you know, I'm playing it on medium, and I'm still really enjoying it. It's not a problem. It's these, they tend to, I think, last longer, and games aren't. I don't think you're getting those giant leaps that you got. So you're looking at a game and go, wow, this amazing. It's things are lasting longer, but I don't think that's justification of, well, if we sell, you know, we should sell a Steam Deck for, you know, £800 because, you know, Trevor's going to keep it for, you know, 10 years, and well, no, that doesn't quite make sense. Is you've kind of got to, you know, come out with a good proposition. It's just maybe another way of looking at it and going, well, maybe things aren't quite as bad. And, you know, if you do look around for deals, or if you potentially, you know, buy a secondhand, you know, PlayStation 5, a secondhand Steam Deck, you know, go for a Legion Go S, you can still get a good deal out of it. And then potentially, you know, games aren't going from 16-bit to 32-bit to 64-bit, and they're not, you know, going from 2D to 3D over the course of a few years. And these machines do last, I think, a lot longer. And
you know, the main thrust of this chat has been the main consoles are the things that are getting more expensive, you know, going from the launch price, and now you're looking at paying maybe a couple £100 more 4 or 5 years down the line. I think the best example of, you know, a contrast to that, when consoles, when we were kids, would get cheaper, they would start off at the very most expensive they're going to get on the day they come out, and then, you know, 5-6 years later, there'd be kind of the budget entry level system when, you know, its successor was already out, like PS1 and PS2. You know, the PS2 would be like, you know, probably about £300, you know, in its early years. And then the PS1, which would be alongside it, would be about £80, having been £300 when it came out. The best example I always like to give is the Nintendo 64 in the UK. It was £250 when it came out in March '97 with no games. It was just the controller and the unit, the console itself. And then in the summer of '97, they dropped it down to 149. And then before Christmas, they dropped it to 99. You'd probably be quite pissed off if you paid £249 only a few months before, and now it's going for 99. I mean, Nintendo did that because Sony were absolutely killing them with their price drops. But that's it. The fact that the PS1 dropped from, I think, £180 to 130 on the day the N64 released. So Nintendo had to do something, you know, to keep to at least seem like they've got some value versus the PS1. But yeah,
if you look here, the PS2s, I've just googled this, and it's come up with the official, and this sort of rings true in my mind. The PlayStation 2 came out at £299. Then literally that was in November 2000. Then September 2002, so 2 years later, it dropped down to £199. Then a year later, £169. Then a year later, £129. Basically then 2007, so 2 or 3 years later, it dropped down to £99, and then final price was at £75. And these were all brand new consoles. And so you look in there, and you could almost sort of flip that chart around and saying, well, the PlayStation 5 that came out at you know, what's it, 349 or 400, whatever it was,
449,
and then it's slowly gone up, and and it's almost gone the other direction. So I think you're going to get now when consoles come out, people are going to be like, well, I'm going to, I've got to get it on day one. I've got to get it on day one because,
Yeah.
In 6 months' time, it could go up in price.
Yeah,
And
it's the cheapest it's going to get on day one.
This is cheap as is going to get exactly, and you can actually say the same for, like graphics cards and stuff like that. I remember the day when the top of the range graphics card was maybe 150, maybe £200, and now they're into thousands. And if you get it on day one, potentially the secondary market, you could flip it on the second day for £1,000 more. It just sort of frustrates me. And I think if the pricing was very similar, maybe sort of 3 years ago, or the same sort of pricing as 3 years ago, I might be going, oh, actually, maybe I can get a slightly better graphics card or maybe I'll get some more RAM. Maybe I can change the processor. But I'm actually thinking that, well, I'll leave it another year. Let's just see what happens, and then eventually I'll have to bite the bullet. But
yeah, I mean, back in the day when we talked about how dramatically the prices could drop sometimes. I mean, the N64 is probably the most extreme example, but it didn't really affect how they were perceived, or the people that really wanted it on day one would still go and get it on day one, knowing they're going to be paying the most. Because it could be years before there are substantial price drops that make it a no-brainer kind of thing, and they were selling them multiple millions, especially the PlayStations on launch day, even though everyone knows this is the most expensive they're ever going to get, and basically the idea was you'd have that initial burst of people, and then it would sort of stagnate a little bit, but then you'd drop the price, and then it would build up and it would build up and it would get bigger and bigger and bigger till you hit that final figure right at the end of its life of X hundreds millions of units. That probably won't happen now. I mean, in terms of, it seems consoles have a limit of 100 million-ish. Some will get over that. The ones that are a bit less successful but kind of do okay will be a bit under that. And that's kind of a limit that no one's really. I mean, the PS2 is still the champion. I think that there's a chance the Switch one might overtake it in the next few years if it's still being sold. But that's sold 160 million units. And I think everyone was kind of chasing that for the longest time. But I'm not sure that's realistic now. I think it'll make it. I don't think it'll ever be niche, but I think less people might gravitate more towards PC style gaming devices. I don't necessarily mean buying something, but I mean I can get a cheap thing off eBay, stick a cheap graphics card in, and that could be my system from that point on. There'll be some people that will buy a Steam machine, but
you've got to think
a better option.
With the I was sort of thinking about if you imagine sort of young families. And those prices I was quoting there for a PS2, I thought were sort of pretty reasonable and potentially cheaper if they're second hand. And I think you find now that
I think one quick point as well with the PS2 that a lot of people might not consider who weren't there when it came out, but also it was a DVD player, wasn't it? And a fairly cheap one for the time, and you were getting a console as well. So there was an extra value proposition with the PS2 that other consoles didn't necessarily have before or since. So
because I think now that people are well, what was it? It was a year or two ago when on Digital Foundry, and they sort of said, "Oh yeah, actually, console sales are plateauing." And I was like, where's more people in the world? Why are not more people wanting to play on a Switch or on a PS5, on an Xbox, and so on? Is plateauing. And then I got thinking about that, and you actually see a lot of sort of young people. They'll go, well, I've got a laptop, and that's how I'll watch. I'll watch videos on there. I'll stream the internet, and then my laptop can play games up to a certain level, And when you're 7 or 8 years old or 12 years old, if you've got a hand-me-down laptop that might be, someone might raise their nose at that because they go, well, it's got a graphics card, but it's a 1650, mobile edition. Oh, well, I wouldn't want that. Ugh. But that kid is on there, and he'll play Roblox all day long. He'll play Minecraft all day long. He'll play, Lego Star Wars all day long. Absolutely no problem. Plug that into his TV, and I think I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, well, actually, people are moving away from consoles and they're moving towards. I don't like the term mobile.
More devices, basically.
Cheap desktops, cheap
less
laptops.
the dedicated box. That's I mean, a really good, like, when it's not an apples to apples comparison, but we're sort of saying how consoles plateau about 100-ish million if they're a success, and maybe you could have two of those running together that will do that. And let's say you got Switch, Xbox, and PlayStation. I think combined, you're looking at 300 million, maybe 400 million max. So people that want to game on a dedicated gaming system is I mean, I don't want to say niche, but it's not a completely ubiquitous thing that absolutely everyone does. There's definitely a targeted group of people that buy these things. Whereas a mobile phone, I mean, every single model of iPhone sells well over 100 million units. And that's the device that comes out every year. So the saturation of that, it absolutely destroys any console that's ever came out. But I don't think games consoles could ever really achieve that. They're not. They're still a specialist, like a hobby kind of thing, really. And they'll always kind of be that, really. And this isn't gonna. The price is going up is gonna just, basically put a heart. I mean, if there already was a limit, like we're saying, at best you're going to sell 400 million units of consoles combined with all the Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft together. And that's when the pricing was kind of okay and no one was really complaining too much. Now, that's going to be a lot less than that. And people will turn to just, I'll use my mobile phone, sod it. Or I'll use my crap laptop that I use, or my work laptop. Or people will be more looking to devices that bought for other things that can do gaming as a side, like hustle. Whereas buying a dedicated box that's kind of absurdly expensive, and so I think the sort of chickens are going to come home to roost a little bit. You can't just raise the prices and hope everybody will swallow them. There'll be the hardcore gaming demographic probably will, but the people that sort of the ones that kind of jump on board a console when it's on its right, the sales are going up. Not that first 2 or 3 years of people that are the early adopters. They're the ones that will drop off and will be like, sod it, I'm not going to bother, I'll just use my mobile phone, people that don't read Eurogamer every day or watch Digital Foundry, which is most people, they're the ones that will turn away. I think that's how it's going to pan out.
Exactly. And there are other ways to do, play pretty new games, even the latest games, and that be, I know, you watch things like, budget builds on YouTube, and retro, what was it, a random gaming in HD, and there's all these channels.
He did a great video. Literally yesterday, I think, where he showed James Bond First Light, or Bond Charted as I like to call it, running on a GTX 980 from 2013, and it ran fine. It was 30 frames a second, but it's playable, and that's just goes to show exactly what you're saying, Stu.
Exactly. So you can get out there and get some cheap components, get them into a case, put it together, and play the latest games. You will have to make compromises on visual qualities and so on. But hey, that's spending £150 on parts, building it yourself, or spending £600-700 on a PlayStation, PS5, and then you're locked down to, buying the games on a somehow. I think sort of PC gaming, and especially if you've got the ability to put it together yourself, or at least do a few upgrades. I think there's, I think that's such good value for money, and you're seeing more and more people realize this, that they're going, oh, actually, yeah, I can do this, and I'm not fussed about, having a 240 hertz monitor and the frame rate matching that on the game, and that's not the biggest important thing. Is I want to play the story, or I just want to play FIFA, or I want to play Counter Strike, CS:GO 2, whatever, Counter Strike 2. I want to play Roblox. I want to play World of Warcraft, or I want to play
the forever games, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I think actually forever games are, cause that's what people are trying to hit on, and that's where Sony is getting into bother with things like Concord, or what came out recently, Marathon, and if you hit the jackpot with these forever games, then obviously you're going to make loads of money. But it seems like 1 in 100 of them will be the next Fortnite, will be the Rocket League, will be the Counter Strike, and then the rest of them, they might have a few thousand players, or 20, 50,000 in the first week, but then they suddenly just drop off. And
yeah, that's right.
And so I actually think it's these sort of forever games that people want to play, and I've never touched Roblox in my life, but that seems to be this whole sort of world where you go in there and people create games within it, and then you go and play those. You'll meet your friends on there. I'm sure it's full of weirdo men that are trying to that do naughty stuff, but it certainly, people seem to like.
The point is, someone could just be in that and nothing else, and they're quite happy that that's satisfied their gaming needs,
Exactly, and they're using their dad's old work laptop.
Yeah,
and they're happy as Larry, and yeah, good on them.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting how all this, especially when the new generation of consoles come out, like how much a PS6 is going to be. Obviously they, like we said, like the hardcore gamers are the ones that buy those systems on day one. How will it being, potentially quite expensive affect that? Will we see? It seemed like every time a new PlayStation came out, it would always the sales would be record breaking versus the last generation. The PS6 might be the first one where there's been a decrease because people just think it's too expensive, so they won't. They fall off completely from buying a console, and like I said, stick to their phones, their old laptops. It'll be interesting to see that. And I guess probably the last question to ask, we touched upon it a little bit. The Steam machine's coming. I mean, it was supposed to be early 2026. I mean, it's absolutely not early 2026 now. We're getting into the middle of the year. I think it's probably going to get announced, the price, finally, probably next month. Otherwise, they're going to fall out of that sort of H1 2026 that they vaguely sort of said. We know now that the Steam Deck is pushing 800 quid for the top tier model. How much do you think a Steam machine will be now?
I can't see it being anything less than 1,000. I think they're going to, or what I would do with it is sell it as a machine. No controller, no keyboard, no mouse. Potentially, I think this is a 512 and a 2 gig. Maybe to do a 512 and a 1 gig machine, something along those lines. So you actually, it's I want them to make money. I want it to be a success, but I think it's going to be sort of near on £1,000, and and I can see it as soon as it comes out. My whole YouTube subscription will be, I can make a Steam machine for less. I can make it. I can get the same power using all these great second-hand parts, half as much. And it will be, but it won't probably have the kudos of the new Steam machine.
Well, the interesting thing at the moment is like people have hacked the PS5 and put like basically Linux on it, and and they've been running games and they run really well, and even like playing PS3 games through emulation through RPCS3, and they run great. And I think stick Steam OS on that. Obviously, at the moment you need a very specific firmware of a PS5 to do it. That might open out later, and it means like newer PS5s can do it. But I would love to see Steam OS on a PS5 and what the sort of performance people are getting. If it turns out you can hack a recent PS5 and stick Steam OS on it, I think you're better off buying that and doing that versus a Steam machine, which is more powerful then. Or the Steam machine falls beneath the base PS5. Horsepower wise for potentially £300-400 more. It's just it's not worth it.
I think you got the Xbox, the Project Helix, whatever that's going to look like, and then I think
stick Steam OS on that.
Exactly, and then you've got the whole other people will make machines in the similar vein to what was it, TV based PCs, and they'll come out and put on price pressure hopefully onto the Steam machine. But I think it's always exciting to see all the new technology and stuff, but I think they've got to realize what the market can handle, so what customers can afford, because they can make the price whatever they want, but and there might be, well, we have to make it this price because that's what RAM costs us, and we have to make a 7.5% margin because that's what we have to do. But then there'll be a point where customers will say, no, I'll hold on to my other machine for another year. I'll learn how to build it myself. I'll stick with my PS5. I'll wait for something else. Actually, I enjoy gaming on my phone. I play all the games I want on that. So actually, you can shove
Nintendo
it.
If Nintendo release a Switch 2 Lite, and shave maybe £100 or 50 or 60 quid off the base or the standard Switch 2, I think that could be a huge seller, because that will probably be by far the cheapest option. They can bang out a Switch 2 Lite for 350 quid, with the normal model being 430 or whatever it's going to go up to, it'll be about that. I think that'll be a great value for money as a gaming console, and that'll blow the PS6 and everything else out of the water for value. Obviously, it's going to be less powerful, but I think the Switch 2 will keep up with the PS6. Developers are going to make games that are more scalable because they have to, because people are keeping their consoles for longer. So those games that it's got DLSS already on it and doing a pretty good job making games look great when you plug into the TV. Those probably a Switch 2 Lite wouldn't plug into the TV. But I think that could be a great value for money, and you might see Nintendo kind of getting even more successful, which I'll be happy with in terms of fighting Sony. But my sort of final thoughts on what this means for the Steam machine. I can't see it being anything less than 800 quid, maybe with the controller. It's not horrific, but I think the Steam machine's probably going to be dead in the water at that price. Ideally, it needed to be about 500-600 quid for it to be a success, but if they can't sell a Steam Deck for less than 500 quid or 600 quid, they surely can't sell an expensive to produce box with 6 times the amount of power and everything. So I Yeah, I don't think it's going to be much of a success. I think it'll be a bit of a damp squib now if it comes out at 800 quid. There'll be people that will buy it. You know, it's not. I don't think it will be utterly dead. It doesn't rely on third-party support like a PlayStation does. You know, the games are going to come out that will work on the Steam machine. It's a PC. It doesn't need specific games made for it.
Yeah,
so
it's already got
like you'll buy
games,
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like you'll buy one and then, oh, no one's making games for it. I wasted my money. You know, like someone might have, when they bought an Atari Lynx, you know, in 1990, and no one was making games for it, and you spent all that money on it. So you're never going to be in that situation. But well, I guess, you know, the comparison is, you know, the Steam Deck. You know, I think that seems to have sold about 8 to 10 million units. Yeah, that's tiny compared to the Switch 2 and the Switch 1 and the PS5, but it's a different kind of demographic that appeals to, and it's more limited. That's quite a big success for handheld PC gaming systems. Will the Steam machine get anywhere near that? I don't think it will. Hopefully we're wrong, and somehow they'll make it less than £800, and maybe they could get it down to 600, but I can't see it now. But yeah, there should be an announcement coming anytime soon, and we'll find out in the next few weeks. So yeah. But anyway, Stu, where can you find us?
We're everywhere. So search Console Shock on any podcast client. Search Console Shock on YouTube. Search Console Shock on Facebook. Search Console Shock on Twitter. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, so we're everywhere.
Cheers, Stu. Well, thanks very much for watching and listening, and we hope to see you in the next one. Take care.
Take it easy. Bye-bye.